welcome everyone. Welcome to Wednesday Live, and I hope you're all having a busy week and you're all doing well. Tonight we are joined by Tara, and we're going to be talking all about imposter syndrome. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here, Bill.
Yeah, it's awesome that you've asked to come on again and talk to us. And I was just saying, it's a hot topic at the moment. Some people have been talking about it in the group, and they've been talking about their own sort of thoughts and feelings as well. So, which is quite nice, and sort of raising the subject of imposter syndrome. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the imposter syndrome industry. Is that right?
I suppose. Yes, it's quite specialized actually. So I do call myself a specialist. So I trained as a holistic therapist and coach 22 years ago. So I've been doing that for quite a while. And then in 2015, 2016, one of my clients came to me and said, what's this imposter syndrome stuff? So I thought, okay. And I started digging into it, did all sorts of research. I started interviewing people. And it was very clear to me that the specialist coaching work that I'd been doing around beliefs, it was exactly what the root cause of imposter syndrome is. And it was this big aha moment for me. Then I did lots of them follow up, and I've interviewed over 700 people talking one-to-one about their imposter syndrome, and put together a program to get rid of imposter syndrome, basically. And I'm still learning and still evolving. And now I've just brought out a new do-it-yourself course that I can share a little bit about later.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later, aren't we? And I've seen the course and listened to all the videos, and they're amazing. They're really good to get into. So imposter, I think you're going to go and we're going to have a little slideshow, aren't we, about what imposter syndrome is, and has it been around for a long time? The terminology, it's like all these things suddenly pop up and we hear it lots, don't we?
Yeah. So it was first identified back in 1978, so a very long time ago. But if you did a search on Google Trends on, the number of times imposter syndrome was mentioned, it's kind of a flat line until about 2015. And then into 2015, it's a bit of a hockey stick curve, and now it's becoming more and more talked about. And the more I think it's talked about, the more people recognize it, so the more it gets talked about.
Definitely.
Which is great. It's great that there's this awareness. But the problem with that is that some myths and misinformation come out of that, and there are stories of this is what you need to do, and it's like no, and there are other stories like it affects women more than men, and actually the research says it's absolutely identical. So there's things I'd like to address. This is why I like to talk to groups like yours to help people, because if you know what the problem is and you know how to deal with it, you've got a solution. And if you don't know what the problem is, or someone says, drink peppermint and licorice tea, that helped my imposter syndrome, right? Is a correlation. Maybe you just, it did something, but it didn't actually work for imposter syndrome. And imposter syndrome is so stressful, and it holds you back. And there are trigger times for imposter syndrome. There are times where it can come out and bite you, if you like, really, really come alive for you. And that can be for when you are either starting a new business, or you're expanding your business, or you're growing your business, you're at the edge of your comfort zone, and that can be a trigger for imposter syndrome. And so that's what I'd like to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard you in 2020 doing a podcast with a mentor of mine, and it was just like having a light bulb switched on. I'd done all this 18 years in the police service, never heard of imposter syndrome. And when you started describing the thoughts, feelings, emotions that can happen, it was like, bloody hell, all that time I had it. And it really really sort of suffered from it at times.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that is that if you don't know what it is, right, then you think, it's just me, right? I'm the only one who has this. And you think it's something to do with me. It's my personality, or it's a character flaw or weakness or something like that. Why can't I just get on with it? Everyone else seems to be doing all right. And it's not. And you really realize, actually, that's imposter syndrome. It's not you. right?
Right.
And
Why don't these big organizations talk about it? You'd think like the police and teachers, because I was speaking to teachers as well, and no one's actually taught about it in their profession. But let's educate this group of people.
yes, I think that we're at the front of the waves educating people about this, but I would say they are catching up.
Mm-hmm.
But it's big organizations, going to take a while.
Yeah, definitely. But I think it holds the organization back as well.
Oh, hugely, right? If people are not able to operate at their best, and we'll see why in a little bit, but if people aren't operating at their best, then they're not doing the best they could possibly do. They're not contributing as much as they have a capacity for. They're just not able to. And so the organization doesn't get the most out of them. So everybody loses with imposter syndrome. There's no winners.
No. And possibly, they might leave their jobs as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's have a look at your presentation.
Yeah, sure. Right. So I will just share my screen here. And can you see that okay?
Yeah, here we go.
All right. So I've had to start with a dog picture. So I have had, I don't have at the moment. I think I will again, but not just yet. Yeah. So, right, imposter syndrome. Let me just, okay. So first we've got to start off with what imposter syndrome is. It's the secret feeling of being a fraud, of being not quite good enough, despite being successful. So when you're not a fraud, and combined with the fear of being found out. Right? And it affects 70% of high achievers, business owners, right across the board. And as I said, Bill, men and women equally. So it's a big deal. So here's how you might spot it. So these are things that people most often see, the imposter syndrome behaviors. We've got procrastinating, deflecting praise, where you say, oh, it wasn't me. Oh, I just got lucky. But you actually mean it. You don't feel like you did earn what you got and what you've done. Sorry?
Definitely do that now at times. Oh, we're lucky to do this, or we're lucky to have had, or
and it sounds modest, right? It sounds like you're being polite and modest, but if you genuinely think, how on earth did I get here? How did I deserve this? Then it can start to be a problem. Avoiding is avoiding opportunities. Hiding is not speaking up, not getting your voice heard, and secrecy is keeping it a secret. So this group of behaviors is all about not being in the spotlight. If I'm not in the spotlight, people won't say, hey, what are you doing there? You don't deserve to be there, which is the fear of imposter syndrome. Yeah. And then we've got
challenge you, will they?
Sorry, they won't challenge you. Yes. Yeah. But you see, the problem with that is if we kept ourselves small, right, we'd never grow, we'd never achieve, we'd never build our business, we'd never achieve what we're capable of. So, it's a real shame to be held back like that. And then there's the other parts of the imposter syndrome behaviors, which are about, okay, I'm feeling I'm not quite good enough, so I'll try and make myself good enough. So you do comparing, and you compare yourself with everybody else who looks really successful. Right? You don't compare yourself with the unsuccessful people, right? Just the successful one. And you think, who am I to be doing this? Right? You might go and do a talk and see the other people on the stage, for example, and who am I to? I know them. They're famous. Who am I? Yeah. Perfectionism is a consequence of imposter syndrome. You feel like you're not quite good enough, so you work really, really hard, and it's very stressful to try and be good enough, to try and be perfect. Unfortunately, that's exhausting, and it doesn't leave you feeling good. Over preparing is spending way more time on something than it actually needs, which means that overall you spend more time doing your work, whatever your work is, and it eats into your family time, your personal time, your hobbies, your relaxation time. You get very stressed. Not having enough is a feeling like I don't have quite enough qualifications. Maybe if I just had
Mm-hmm.
one more, poodle cut course.
Just be one more course. We'll make everything better, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Well, you see, one more course. If I do one more, then I will start feeling better about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, it doesn't do that. Once you've achieved competence, and this is for people who are capable and competent. Once you achieve competence, then that extra course does very little for you, and it won't make you feel better. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is pushing through, like all the stress and feelings of isolation that imposter syndrome brings up. You just try and squash it down and just grit your teeth and push through it. And that doesn't make it go away either. So all of this is very stressful, very exhausting, and very distracting. You can't focus so well. You feel isolated. And this is not you at your best. And it's not you enjoying what you're doing either.
Do you think that the rise of social media, and I don't know if like you're saying, the Google search, obviously Google became more prevalent, but the rise of social media has fueled some of the imposter syndrome, the comparing, the perfectionism, that sort of kind of stuff?
I absolutely do. Putting filters on on a Zoom so you look glamorous, right? Because you don't think that as you are is good enough, right? It makes you feel bad about yourself. Social media, particularly Facebook, where people, they show all the good stuff, and they say, "Hey, this is my best month ever, and it's a fabulous, grand total," but they don't show you their worst month ever, right? So it makes that distortion even bigger. But with comparing also, what you're doing is you're comparing how everybody else looks, their success, with how you're feeling and your self-doubt internally. And that's the big problem. It's not even a, apples to apples comparison. And so all of this just reinforces it. So
what I hear a lot talking to pet groomers is they often hang out in other pet grooming groups and other pet grooming pages, like Facebook pages, so they see the befores and afters and the pictures of the finished dog, and they're like, I can't produce that. I can't, I'm not good enough. They compare their work to other people's work, and that.
Yes, exactly. And that particular person might have done, I don't know, what, 40 dog grooms that week, and that was the best one, and they show the best one, and at the right angle and everything like that. Yeah, it really doesn't help. So when you apply this to people who are in business for themselves, this is kind of what it looks like. Not getting help, not getting started. So I know with sometimes dog grooming, you've got that step between working in somebody else's office and then going into business by yourself. So that's, you might just not get over that stuff. Underpricing, procrastinating, all those things you need to do. Lack of PR. So this is not putting your ads out, not putting social media out, not writing newspaper articles, right, and having them in the local article. Overworking is the over-preparing. It's just spending a lot more time doing, well, this would be the business stuff rather than the actual grooming themselves. Not quoting for things, not getting involved in partnerships, there's another one. Not publishing, so there'll be all sorts of things, like I said, an article in a magazine or something like that. Underselling, and this is where you have the deflecting praise comes in. People say, "Oh, that dog looks great. Oh, yeah, well, it was nothing." Yeah. Rather than saying, "Would you be interested in bringing your dog to try it out?" Yeah. And then lastly, lack of support. So this is kind of business owners in general. So Bill, what do you think about the things that you see in dog grooming?
Yeah, maybe like they're not getting help is, perhaps burying their head in the sand a bit, and not, or a lot of people will say, I'm not a numbers person, so I can't work out my numbers. But actually, I think some of that is like an imposter syndrome sort of response. Do you think, when they're like, they just don't want to do it? They don't feel they don't feel they're good enough to be all over their numbers and know their numbers.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because sometimes people are told when they're kids that they're not great at maths, And that means they think that they can't do their books because they've still got this idea that they're not great at maths, or more, that feeling they're not good enough. So they come to, I don't know, do their tax return, right? There's the other one. They come to do their tax return, and they have this fear come up. What if I get it wrong? What if the taxman comes down on me and I get a fine? And and all of this, the anxiety that builds up. Definitely.
Underpricing has just got to be the biggest in this industry that I can see, and quite often there's a saying within the industry that goes around quite a lot called charge your worth. So you see this in a lot of groups that when it comes down to pricing, they say charge your worth. But what if you're not feeling worthy?
Oh, that's such a good point. Charge your worth. That's like this big bear trap just waiting for you, right? Yeah, because if you're charging your worth and you're not feeling good enough, then you wouldn't. No, change it. Charge your results, right? Charge the smile on the owner's face when they see their dog looking fantastic. That's what you're charging.
Yeah, definitely. Procrastination, I mean, that could be introducing a new service. So many people I speak to, they go out and they get all excited and they buy, maybe they buy a toothbrush, like an ultrasonic toothbrush to add to their services, but they do the training and then they're like, they sort of stop and it goes back onto the shelf because they're procrastinating. They don't know how to go forwards. And yeah, that probably links in with that imposter syndrome as well.
It definitely, and then maybe they're not splashing it all over social media saying, "Hey, I've got this great kit." Lack of PR, and they're not underselling, not saying, "Okay, we've got grooming, we've got this groom booked in for you. Would you like our new ultrasound tooth cleaning as well?" Yeah,
that's it. And groomers are very good at reaching out to each other, so they are supportive. But what if everyone feels the sort of same? How does that work? If you're all suffering from imposter syndrome,
the chances are high, right? Because 70% of people, that's a lot of people. So chances are high in a group. They, back in the 70s, they tried to start support groups for people who identified themselves as having imposter syndrome, and they found the support groups didn't work because A, people wanted to keep it a secret, and B, they thought it was just them. So even if they're sitting in a circle of 10 people, they think that the comparing comes in. Oh, they're all fine. No, it's only me. So it actually didn't work. So yeah, there are very specific things you have to do to address imposter syndrome, and hanging out in a group like that isn't one of them.
And people are very good at putting a brave face on, aren't they? And like anything, you can't see this, so it can be very well hidden as well, can't it?
Yeah, and this. I mean, my typical work is with executives and in large corporations. Right? Nobody would have any idea that they're feeling this way inside. They look confident, they look competent, and they are competent, right? They look confident. No one would have a clue. But they're also not sleeping well. They're stressed out. They're spending way too much time working, and they're feeling anxious a lot. So yeah.
I suppose for me, when I was in my previous career, I had this uniform, like this suit of armor to put on every day, which probably helped me get over it a little bit.
It's interesting. So the root cause of imposter syndrome is a belief about yourself, and it's an identity level belief. And when you do something like interesting, you put a uniform on, you kind of step into that identity. And so actually having that, group identity is actually a little bit helpful. When you don't have something like that, so you step into the dog grooming community, right? You don't feel the same kind of like you've got backup, right? And you don't feel like, and it can lead to people feeling very, very isolated. Yeah,
I think there's definitely there'll be a lot here that people will recognise as as part of the symptoms.
Yeah. Okay, so let me explain a little bit more then how imposter syndrome is showing up. I can go on now.
Mm.
Okay, all right. So if we have imposter syndrome, there are 3 types of symptoms with imposter syndrome. It's quite a complex thing, which is why you'll see a lot on the internet about, oh, there's no solution to it. There's nothing you can do. You just got to grit your teeth and you know things like that. The thing is, there are 3 things. There's imposter syndrome thinking. There's what it does to your nervous system, and then there's the behaviors that we just talked about. So in terms of the thoughts, you feel not good enough, you're overthinking, you're self-criticizing and self-doubt. So that's a typical group of thoughts. And all of underlying this is all of this sense that I'm not quite good enough. And that leads your brain to say, hey, there's something wrong. There's danger. So it leads part of your brain that's looking out for danger to go, hey, there's danger here. That triggers your nervous system. Right? And your nervous system goes into a kind of survival mode. It goes into fight or flight or freeze state, which is a response to a physical threat, like a tiger in the room. You'd either want to, fight it, hit it with a stick to defend yourself, run away, or freeze and hope it doesn't see you. So that triggers very, all animals have this, and it triggers that in us. It can affect your sleep. It can lead to tension. And then the feelings that brings up is a sense of anxiety and overwhelm. So all of this is done automatically from those thoughts. And then with all of that, your brain says, okay, how can we cope? Right? What can we do to cope with this stress, to do something about it? And that's when you get the behaviors coming up, perfectionism, you're comparing, hiding, pushing through all of these. And then when you do those behaviors, then you then judge yourself for it, right? There must be something wrong with me. Why can't I just get over this procrastination? You beat yourself up, and that feeds back into the thoughts. So you see, you've got this cycle going around of these symptoms, basically. And so if you're going to do anything about imposter syndrome, you have to address all 3. Now, often I'll see coaches talk about, let's do some confidence work. But, this isn't a confidence issue, right? This is a deep level belief that you're not quite good enough, which is different. You can't stand in the mirror and do affirmations to try and get over those thoughts. Why? Because you'll still be stressed. You'll still be doing the behaviors, and that's going to be feeding it. You have to actually break this cycle. And you break the cycle by tackling all 3 of these symptoms at the same time, all 3 of them together.
When you look at this, and it's just tiring, isn't it? You can just look at that and go, someone that feels like this is just going to be wiped out, along with doing their, day-to-day job, running their business, running their house, dealing with the kids or dealing with the household chores, paying the bills, and then you put this on top of it. It's just going to wipe you out. Does it ever get confused with depression, or because some of the symptoms and signs and symptoms are similar?
Yeah, so where it leads to is exhaustion. As you say, it's exhausting, and the thoughts around it. It tends to lead towards burnout. That's the most common place, and people quit their jobs, they quit their career, they hand in they close their businesses and go and work for someone else because it just feels like it's all too much. Mm-hmm. It can then, with burnout and depression can link to one another. Depression has a number of causes. Some of them are chemical, some of them environmental, but this is a way that you could get into certainly a burnt out and depressed state. Yeah, definitely.
And I suppose when someone has all these behaviours and thoughts and physical signs and symptoms, and they do go and close their business down and get another job, do they suddenly just think nothing's changed?
They will find that. Yeah,
it's still there because we haven't given up it's not the business that's the issue, is it? It's that the inner feelings that we've got.
That's exactly it. And that is the real, agony of imposter syndrome, is that, it might feel a little bit better for a little while, but, you add a little bit of stress or a bit more demand or challenge within that new job, and it's right back again. And, it leads to regret, and it leads to, feeds back into the thoughts. I'm not good enough. Look, my business failed, or I quit my job. It doesn't go away by itself. And I think that's a really key point here. It just doesn't, unless you address these three.
I was thinking back over my life in the workplace, and I started off in insurance, and I got into trouble a few times when I first started because I was procrastinating. I was hiding paperwork. I was avoiding phone calls. I was, So could you even like identify this in other people if you've got like a member of staff that's underperforming, or could that be one of the reasons why they're struggling to perform for you?
It could be. As I said, 70% of people experience it, so the chances are fairly high. Experience it at some point in their career, right? It comes and goes depending on what challenges are going, but it never goes completely. It comes back, right, whenever you get a new challenge. But one of the things about it is the secrecy part. It's really hard to identify. You just can't tell. So I've had so many clients who said, after they finished the one-to-one program, the deep program that I run for execs, after they finish that and they're feeling so much better, and they might talk to maybe some of their colleagues about it, and they almost universally they say, we had no idea, I would not have guessed. People just can't.
No. So. I remember when the insurance company, I got into that trouble, and then I was assigned a mentor who guided me closely, and then that started to improve things for me. So it's that high challenge and low support.
That's exactly it. And when you started getting the support, then the stress reduces. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So let me see what else. So here's some really important points about this that I wanted to make about imposter syndrome. Firstly, that you're not alone, right? 70% of people have it. It doesn't mean that 70% of people have to suffer it, right? You go into you go into a dentist's office with a sore tooth, right? And then there are 6 other people sitting there with, holding their jaw because they've got a sore tooth, and 3 are just coming for a checkup. And, if one of them stood up and says, well, look, clearly it's just part of the human condition to have a sore tooth, let's just walk out and not bother doing anything about it. That'd be ridiculous. But, some people are saying with imposter syndrome, oh, there's nothing you could do, get on with it. Like, we all have it, get on with it. And I think that's just so damaging. The other part is it's not you. Like we said right at the start, right? It's not your personality. It's not a weakness, and it's not a flaw. It's a definite something. Yeah, and it's driven by this core belief, which is what my one-to-one program addresses. But there is still something you can do about it. And so if you address those 3 groups of symptoms I mentioned, and address them at the same time, then you break the cycle.
So address the thoughts and the behaviors
and the stress all together. So not just, so you see, it's not just a thoughts thing. So you don't just try and do mindset or affirmations or stuff like that. It's not just the behavior. So you don't try and change your habits, not without addressing the thoughts and the stress. So ways to calm yourself, calm your environment, calms what triggers you, and there's several things in that. And so this is what's in my new course, my Outsmart Imposter Syndrome course. I think you mentioned it on your group earlier, actually. So let me just show you a little. That's a little logo for it there. So it's 8 steps. Basically, it's an 8-step process, and what it does is, you identify your unique imposter syndrome profile, because everybody's a bit different. You develop tools that are personalized to you because of that profile, personalized to you to get yourself calm, to calm the triggers, and to address the behaviors, to reduce the challenge and increase the support. And the result of that is then you start to feel that you are lighter, calmer, motivated, and more in control. So, I mean, if you are looking, there are many things out there available for addressing imposter syndrome, but they need to address those 3 at the same time. The thoughts and the behaviors and the stress. And if they're not, then it's really not going to be as effective as it might. So that's why I've launched a program in the first place.
And what I liked about when I was doing the 8-step program is the videos are made by yourself, aren't they? And as you can tell tonight, just from talking to you, you're very calm, very soft with your language. It's not, you explain everything well, so you're not like lost in any other language, and you understand it straight away, and you can start identifying it with it.
Yeah, that's it. It all starts. I'll just stop sharing this. It all starts with awareness, right? It all starts with knowing what it is, how it's affecting you, and when you can see it, even just seeing it can calm you down a bit. It's like, oh, that's not me doing this stupid procrastinating again, and beat yourself up for it. You go, oh, that's imposter syndrome. No, wait, I've done the course. I've got these tools. Let me use the tools. Yeah. And then there's something you can do. It puts you back in control. You feel like you're not hopeless. You feel like, you're not helpless anymore.
Yeah, and what I found was interesting, I think it's in the introduction, is like imposter syndrome is not a mental health condition. It's something that we're not born with. It's it's something that we can solve, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, it's absolutely. So so a common question that I get is, where does it come from, right? Because I've talked about this belief, this root belief that your worth depends on what you do. That was actually discovered, right, identified in the 1950s, right? So there's this really big psychologist, grandfather of personal psychology, Carl Rogers, and he went on this big quest, right? So what is the root cause of happiness, right? What causes happiness? Why are some people happy and some not? He's seen thousands of people. So he looked into it, and he actually found the answer, right? The answer is we have to have a belief that our worth as a person is unconditional. It doesn't depend on what you do. But then, and he looked into it, he's like, oh, okay, but the natural place for that to develop is in very early childhood. And if you're not taught it between the ages of 18 months and 3 years old, that's it. So he actually was pretty disappointed by that, because he's found like the solution. It's like, but you can't do anything for adults. Well, that was at that time, they thought the brain couldn't change. You can't change beliefs. Once your brain is fixed in your early 20s, that's it for life. Now, neuroscience has now moved on. We know that we have neuroplasticity. The brain can change, and now and so you can change that belief, where it all comes from.
That's it. And this 8-step course isn't. There's a bit of homework to do, isn't there? There's some guides to fill out and to work out and to explore. But it's not rocket science. It's not, and it's not anything too challenging. And when I was listening to it, it's like, yes, this is all clear, and you can sort it out by yourself.
It's very, very doable. Yeah. Well, there's 2 things you can do. You can either try and change the belief, right, which is that deep, intensive work that I do, or you can address the symptoms, and that's what the imposter syndrome course does. And yeah, you've got your worksheets, you fill them out, you've got them to refer to, you get lifetime access, you go back and watch the videos again, and like you say, not rocket science, but they're put together in such a way that they're addressing all three of those symptoms at the same time. And that's really the secret sauce of it, I think.
Yeah, and so it's eight videos, isn't there? Is that something you'd recommend doing, like one a week, working on it, listening to it, maybe listen to it a few times, do the corresponding worksheet with it?
Yeah, so you do it at your own pace. I think, some of these things you do need to do at your own pace. If you try to rush through it, then you're not going to get as much out of it, but you do need to keep moving and complete the whole thing, because the whole thing works, as a whole altogether, and it's not a series of tips that you can just dip into. It's an actual process that you progress through. Yeah.
Self-help course, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's a course. You've got the videos, you watch the videos, you fill in the worksheets, and then and the worksheets is you either developing your awareness about imposter syndrome for you, or putting together plans to help calm all those symptoms. Of course, then the next step is to put those plans in place. And, it might take you a few weeks to start putting some of the plans in place, increasing your support, decreasing the challenge, things like that.
That's what I was going to ask, how long can someone, is it like a piece of string? Like, I don't think recovery is the right word, is it? But how long can someone sort of remove the symptoms of imposter syndrome from their life?
It's dialing them down, right? So we talked about imposter syndrome and getting people to exhaustion and to burnout, right? So it's dialing them down. So you'll still be aware of them, right? Something will come up, but at least you'll say, hey, that's imposter syndrome, it's not me. So you've already, you've already got that help. And then, there are steps that you can do to dial it down. And also when you know what your triggers are, then you can plan for them, right? If you know that there are two massively triggering events coming up that tend to make you feel like an imposter, feel like a fraud, don't do them on the same day. Right? Put a gap in between, do them in separate weeks, things like that. When you manage your time like that, what you're doing is you're managing your environment and you're managing your internal environment, I guess, as well.
I know, like, talking about triggers, one of mine probably still is phoning people that I don't know, or phoning people up to do stuff. So I put on a little in-person event on Monday, and you talk about high challenge, low support. I had the support of a virtual assistant, which was able to go out and make the inquiry. So maybe I sort of avoided the challenge there a bit, but I still had to turn and.
Yeah. Well, so in that case, so one of the things within the course is it teaches you how to dial down the behaviors as well. So your starting point with that is like, I got a call to make to a stranger. I don't want to do it. I'll avoid it. I'll procrastinate. I'll go and do something else instead, right? And then nothing gets done, right? So the video on that procrastinating, right, has got step by step. Let's get you calm, and then makes a little bit of change. So it's like a little tiny stretch, and then let's get you calm again, a little tiny stretch, and get you calm. So rather than you're not jumping into the deep end. Right, you're doing step by step, and what happens is it becomes more familiar. So, after your second call, you might be still a little. After your 50th call, it's going to be so much easier because you'll be used to it. You'll be familiar with it. You would have had some good results and things like that. So so there's a process in there, but you do need to apply it when it comes up.
Yes, it's like just retraining your thoughts and retraining your mind just to prove, I suppose, that you're actually okay afterwards. You're fine.
That's it. Yes, that's exactly it. Yeah, it's a process that's done around the fear of spiders, and it's getting people from a phobia. So although these imposter syndrome behaviors aren't phobias, the process still works really well as well.
Now, as a parent myself, is there things that I perhaps do that could fuel imposter syndrome? I mean, do children have imposter syndrome? Do they pick that up, or is it something when we're adults, sort of thing?
So the belief that drives imposter syndrome is developed that your worth is conditional, that your worth depends on what you do. develops between the ages of 18 months and 3 years old.
Right.
That's where we pick up that belief.
Too late.
And then sorry?
Too late for my ones then.
Well, so there's still things you can do. All right. So and the reason why you didn't teach your kids that their worth was unconditional is because you weren't taught that yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and your parents weren't taught, and your parents, and society, 99.999% of people have that belief that their worth is conditional, and it's reinforced as a child when when kid does something well, and you say, "Good girl, good boy," right? And what you're doing is you're saying they are good, right? Their worth for what they've done. And so it's not separating out their worth and their actions, and that's what we're doing here. So the best thing that you can do as a parent is to address your own imposter syndrome, because they're learning from you. They learn by what you say about yourself, what you say about the world, right? They're learning by example. But that's the very best thing you can do. But stop saying the good girl, good boy. You ask them, if they come back and they've done something in school, and how was school? Oh yeah, we did this. Ask them if they had fun, right? Ask them what they learned, right? What they might do differently, and what was the best part of it, right? Not, you are good because you got a B plus or something like that. So it's inherent judgment of a person by what they do, and the more you can separate that out, it's not easy to do when you've still got it inside yourself, but that's how you would work with kids.
Cool. And I should have asked this before we went live, but I wanted to ask you about, we're coming across a lot of people that are coming up against ADHD. We're starting to talk about ADHD and other conditions like that, and a lot of adults now are being diagnosed with it later in life. Do they mix? Does imposter syndrome and ADHD, does it fuel it? Does it make it worse? How do they sort of mix, if they do at all? It's just
the causes are different, right? ADHD doesn't come from a belief, which imposter syndrome does. There's still a debate about what causes ADHD, but the more stressed you are, then the more likely it is that you'll have symptoms, right? The more likely, you activate your nervous system, right? Your nervous system is looking around for danger, right? And part of, attention deficit is that you're not able to focus, right? And so whether they're linked, I don't know. That's not my speciality, but I'm sure that the calmer you are, then the easier it will be able to deal with your ADHD.
So a double whammy, isn't it? If you're suffering with imposter syndrome and then ADHD on top of that, maybe that's something for the future.
I think when, because neuroscience, brain science is advancing all the time, and we're learning more and more about the brain and how it operates. So I think further down the line, some new information is going to come out, and then we'll be able to see. Of course, when we know what's causing it, then we can find a solution there.
Yeah, I suppose I was coming at it as that people maybe with ADHD don't get imposter syndrome. Sometimes they're a lot bolder and a lot braver and don't have, it doesn't hold them back when talking to people. And
so there has been a lot of research done with imposter syndrome to try and match it to a personality type, right? Match it to personal behaviors. And, there was almost 20 years of research looking at all these different personality profiles and trying to match it. They couldn't find one.
Yeah.
Right? Absolutely nothing to do with your personality, nothing to do with being an introvert or an extrovert, nothing to do with any of the markers in personality. And of course, when you understand that it's a belief that was developed or rather not developed, your unconditional worth belief was not developed, so things stayed merged, your actions and your worth, then you can understand why it's not your personality. right? And then it means you can get rid of the imposter syndrome and your personality doesn't change, right? We're not turning you into someone who you're not. We're getting rid of the stuff that's stopping you being who you are.
Being successful.
Yeah.
And what's the you work with sort of CEOs of high level companies? There's been some real debilitating sort of symptoms with them. It's like, can you think of any one case in particular that was really sort of holding them back and harming their career? And
well, there's quite a few. So people quitting their jobs entirely. So I've got one example. I've written a book on masking, which is for coaches, the Coach's Guide to Imposter Syndrome. And in there, this is one of the first people I interviewed actually about imposter syndrome, Daniel. And he quit after 2 months in a high profile job. He quit his career as a lawyer, didn't go back for 15 years. And started as a legal assistant, and now he's got his one-man band. He was this super high flyer, so the regret that he had was just huge. Other impacts, because of the stress, the not sleeping, the lack of energy, lack of focus, it affects your relationships with other people. So I've had, some of my clients who are getting divorced, and they can directly link it to their imposter syndrome. So it's a big deal. It's a big stress. And then, of course, there's, chronic health conditions. There's a woman starting with me, and she was having migraine headaches three times a week, right? Like really bad. And she was just 5 weeks into the program, and she said, I've noticed I don't have headaches anymore, right? And there's, it's the stress. Yeah, there's a big correlation. Yeah. And this is why, so those are my one-to-one clients, but this is why the Outsmart Imposter Syndrome course that I'm talking about is useful, because it's all about calming, all about getting calm. So it means you can be more present with the people around you, you can be more relaxed, you can switch off, rather than being in this, hyper wheel of stress and thoughts and behaviors and going round and round and round.
And you can allow yourself to grow as well. Eda's just put a comment on saying she recognizes that, having a breakdown and leaving a high pressure job and feels that there was probably a lot of imposter syndrome sort of sitting behind that.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the main reason for me leaving my career, but it was definitely like listening to you in 2020 when you spoke with the mentor. It was just like, wow, this has been with me all this time.
Yeah. And what happens that person who's just mentioned leaving their job, very often people will think it must be the job. I mean, that's why they leave, right? They think it must be my job. And, you get quite a lot of, corporate consultants, right, who have left because of imposter syndrome, and they started up their own consultancy thinking it would be better because thinking it's the job, and then finding they've still got imposter syndrome. So I get the consultants coming to me as well, and they're saying, I left my corporate career for this and I've still got it. Let's deal with it.
And that must be quite confusing when you leave your role or your job, and then you turn around and nothing actually changes. It must be leave you even more confused about what's happening and what's going on.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, what that does in thought, you're confused, right? You don't know why, and your brain says, "Oh, it must be you, right? It must be that you're not good enough. This must be true, right?" So it just reinforces that imposter syndrome thinking.
And a question that's just come to me actually, and if you had someone go into a doctor's surgery and present themselves with all these signs and symptoms and stuff, do GPs actually understand this stuff? They've got so much to understand, haven't they? And so much to deal with. Would they pick this out? I'm not sure they would.
It's not a medical condition, right? It's not a mental health issue, although it's a syndrome, which is a very specific medical term. It's not an actual medical syndrome. It's just casually called a syndrome. It's just the popular name for it. So a doctor likely wouldn't identify it as such. So what happens for some of my clients, they go to them and they give them medication to deal with stress. So they give them beta blockers and things like that, which again, don't deal with calming the symptoms a little bit, but actually not solving the problem at all, not calming the behaviors, not calming the thoughts, so it has limited effect.
And do you see like your one-to-one clients, do you see them coming off medication? Obviously that lady with the migraines gone, like coming off antidepressants and things like that because they feel so much better about, or is normal the word? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Because we're solving the cause of that stress. And when you solve the cause of that stress, all the symptoms just melt away, right? They're just gone.
I do wonder if there's just going to be this big like light bulb moment in the NHS where they go, actually, all these years we've been helping these people with medication, but maybe we should have been looking at this instead.
Well, I think probably the only good thing that's come out of the lockdowns has been a greater awareness of mental health and understanding of sensitivity to it and appreciating that it has this very, very large impact. We'll see. I mean, we'll see where it goes.
You could spearhead this, Tara. You could rid the nation of imposter syndrome. Joanna's asked, can the way you're treated at work by a manager or management bring on imposter syndrome within you?
So it doesn't create it, right? Because the cause is that belief that you learned at a very early age. But if you're in a toxic work environment, right, and you're being actively criticized, if you're being, just made to feel not good about yourself, then that's going to reinforce that thoughts that you're not good enough, right? Particularly if someone in authority is telling you. So it can increase it. It can be a trigger for sure. Another trigger can be being bullied. So that doesn't necessarily have to be your manager, but a peer or even someone who's not your peer. You can be bullied by the people you manage as well, right? So, but you can, so all of those are kind of like the external stresses that can just make it all worse. And because we're going around in that cycle of behaviors, thoughts, and stress, anything that feeds into any one of those is going to, make it stronger and make it more noticeable and more disturbing.
Yeah. And if we are the managers and we've got employees and, we reward and say, well done to someone, and they're like, oh, thank you, but I don't really, they don't really feel the reward. They don't really, not that they don't appreciate it, but they don't think they're good enough to have that reward. Is there any way that we can help do that differently, reward them differently, or help them with that?
Yeah, this is I like this. This is quite a subtle question, right? Because you'd think, okay, if you just praise someone more,
praise them to death.
Praise them to death. Yeah, just you are good enough. No, I'm not. You're getting to a pantomime, right? Yes, I am. No, you're not, right? They won't believe you. Right? They will not, because the belief inside their brain is they're not quite good enough. So your voice will be never loud enough to drown that out for them. And the problem is that you're still putting yourself in that position of judge, right? You're still saying, you did well, good girl, good boy, right?
Passing judgment in a good way, but you're still passing judgment.
Exactly, which reinforces this, I should be judged for what I do, right? Me as a person should be judged for what I do. So a better way that you can talk to somebody is about the results. So you can say, that worked well, that was well done, right? Praising the results. And then what you can do is pass it back and allow them to be the judge. What did you like about this? What would you want to do again? What would you do differently? What was the best part of this for you, right? So to get them making their own assessment of what they've done, but taking it away from an assessment of who they are.
So you're praising the result rather than them directly, but because you're praising the result, it goes round to it's their work, isn't it? It's what they've done. So
yeah. So praise their result and then ask them to say what they liked about it, because that gets them focused on the positive, right? Rather than the why didn't you do this? Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be people. So there's people in the group that teach people how to groom dogs, pet grooming. So there might be tutors and mentors and teachers out there that recognize this in their students. So it's another, something to be mindful of when they're teaching. And if they're not getting the results from the people that they're teaching, that could be one of the reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have written the book Unmasking, which is the Coach's Guide to Imposter Syndrome. And if you're in a teaching and coaching role, then I think there's lots of very interesting things that you can do in there that you can use to help the people that you're teaching and training.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's get rid of imposter syndrome from the grooming industry. That would be quite good, wouldn't it?
That'd be amazing. Can you imagine it?
Yeah. So tell us about the course. Is an 8-step course. It's self-taught, so self-learning.
Self-learning videos and worksheets.
Yeah.
Right? And you first, there's awareness. You identify your unique imposter syndrome profile, and then you go through the worksheets to create plans for you to, how-to steps to change the imposter syndrome behavior that we're talking about, how-to steps to change the challenge that you have, increase the support you have, decrease the triggers that you have, and then you've got basically a stack of things that you can do to practically manage the symptoms and dial them right down.
That's it. And so obviously there's an investment element to it. So what's the investment for the course? The
investment is $399 because it's international pricing.
Okay.
We don't work it out in pounds, but yes. I'm sure you have an international audience actually, Bill. So
yeah, there's people in New Zealand and actually a lady from Canada listening at the moment. So
fantastic. Well, it's US dollars, yes. And what we've done is we've got a 10% discount.
Yeah.
So if they use the coupon code PETS, PETS 10.
Yeah.
And that'll give you 10%. 10% off, but because we're trying to deal with procrastination, right? So we'll up until February the 14th. So give yourself some love, Valentine's Day. Offer up until February the 14th. And you can pay in 3 installments as well. You've got an option there at the front.
So if you've been, or maybe you've listened to this tonight or on the podcast or on the YouTube channel, and you've suddenly, that light bulb's turned on, and you've been feeling like this for years, it's not a lot of money just to get rid and start helping yourself. It's an investment in you again, isn't it? And the investment in you is going to benefit your personal life, and hugely it's going to benefit your business life as well. Definitely. So what we'll do is we'll drop the link to the course in the comments, and we'll do some posts about it over the next few days as well. And all they have to do is join the link and sign up and
follow the link. Yeah, click the buy now button, and then you'll get all the options to put in the coupon code PETS, PETS 10, and whether you want to pay it in one go or in 3 goes.
Yeah. And, we could even put it down as training, couldn't you? So you put it for your business, I reckon.
It's absolutely training. Yeah. All the executives I work with, it's a deductible expense. So yes. So for next year's taxes, or when you do your taxes, it's a professional expense.
It's it. And if you're hovering over that buy it now button, or, that link, and you're just procrastinating over it or not sure about it, I have listened to the course. I've done the course. It's a great course, but just think, for that money, you could start getting rid of these thoughts and feelings and stresses and anxiety. It is such a worthy investment, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't not.
Because it's not you, right? You're not alone, and there is something you can do about it, right? You don't just have to live with this. You can actually do something practical. Yeah.
That's it. And you learned something from this yourself, didn't you? Because you're doing, I saw your social media post last month where you put on this one-to-one and courses and programs, and actually you realized people were learning and removing the imposter syndrome a lot quicker.
Well, that's it. So my one-to-one course is eight modules, but it's, it's spread out. And, the first 3 modules of the program are what I've put into the Outsmarting Imposter Syndrome course. It's the awareness, and it's the calming, it's the dialing down of these behaviors. And people were starting to say, just after those 3 modules, oh, I'm feeling much better, I'm feeling so much lighter and calmer, this is great. And I'm like, well, hang on, we haven't even got to the changing the beliefs yet. and that's when the penny dropped, because I've been doing this for several years now. And it's like, oh, actually, there is something that people can do, and they don't have to make that big investment and work one-to-one with me. They can do it in this very well-priced course, and they can do it themselves, and they can get the value and get a tool that they can use. And for me personally, that means that I'm helping more people. Yeah. Right? Because I've only got so many hours in a day that I can work one-to-one with people. A course like this, people can do it themselves. Fantastic. Like you said, let's get rid of imposter syndrome. Let's dial it right down so you can't even hear it.
Yeah, let's move your businesses on and move your personal development on as well.
That's it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing this with the community, and putting together this course to really help people get rid of that imposter syndrome. And hopefully we'll see people signing up, and that hopefully they'll come into this group and actually say, I'm doing a course and it is working, and I'll report back to you. And you're also in the group now as well.
Yes.
Any sort of comments and questions. So
yeah, and they can ask me a question if they want. That's fine. Awesome. DM me. Yeah, brilliant. All right, thank you ever so much, Phil. It's been great.
Welcome. And we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, lovely. Take care.